All right, welcome everyone on this new week here in August of new life. If you heard Pastor Tim's podcast today, but we're going to dive into some news and updates. Even though the Senate is on recess, we are not. We're going to continue praying on the wall for President Trump, the negotiations or not with Iran, and what is to come with the stories out of Colombia. So stay tuned as we dive into this on today's Pipeline Report. All right, welcome back, everyone. Zachar Skadden here in studio as Pastor Tim has made his way to Europe for some speaking engagements that he has there. But we're going to continue on the journey of praying for the office of the president and this nation and helping everyone navigate the season that we are in of kind of a lull here right before the midterms as the Senate has now gone on recess. Give some updates there from the Senate and their thought processes on this from none other than the infamous Senator Kennedy. We'll play that here later. But first, we want to dive into some major breaking news updates. If you haven't seen it already, out of Colombia, there has been a 7.4 magnitude earthquake that hit certain regions of the country where there have been some interesting developments there. The first part of this video, they talk about how people haven't found loss of life, but I just hear this report to see the magnitude of what has actually happened there in the country.
Quake rattled the region earlier today. This new video just in, buildings reduced to piles of rubble. The frantic search for survivors now underway. It's unclear just how many people are hurt, but local officials say there are serious injuries. The epicenter struck about 250 miles west of Colombia's capital, Bogota. Shaking could be felt across the region from Panama to Venezuela. Joining us now, NBC News correspondent George Solis. George, what do you know so far?
Christine, it's a developing situation. The images that are coming out of the area right now are absolutely horrific. There have been buildings that have crumbled. We have seen people being treated on the streets there in so many of these towns. You see there, it's a church steeple there on its side. There are buildings that have been reduced to rubble. Right now, we're hearing about as much as 20 buildings in Cali, there in western Colombia, that were completely demolished, and Reuters reporting about 18 deaths.
So for anybody following us, if you've seen our Sobredosis conferences with our friends from Colombia, they are in Bogota, and a lot of the major effects of this are in Cali, in that region that they talked about there. And it went on for about what our reports on the ground, or it went on for about the shakes for about 2 minutes. And nobody in their area in Bogota seems to be too much affected, but in Cali and other portions of the western part of the country, there tends to be mass crumbling of buildings. And so we're still seeing the fallout there. So we want to just give that update. Our hearts and prayers go out to them. And I know now with the installation of their new president, who tends to be more in favor of freedom, rather than being communist, as their former administration was, that more than likely this current administration here in the United States will be willing and happily to help in this situation. And this is the benefits of having a president that we have and the administration that we have in, as we saw even in Venezuela. And because a lot of times in countries like these, we'll soon find out is they either do or don't, and most of the times don't have the equipment to be able to handle these situations and or the logistical nature to be able to help in these situations. So a government like this, it's, the negative is, okay, it happened. There's people who's loss of life. But if they could learn anything from this, it's that, okay, this is what we need to do. we need these equipment, we need these resources, we need these trainings to be able to handle certain situations. And it's a great opportunity for the church to step up in the region and help be there for the people. So as we learn more, if there's a giving fund, we'll let you guys know here soon as we are continuing to gather these details, as this stuff has happened earlier this morning. So we're gathering, we're trying to assess the needs of seeing what's happening there. And so we'll stay up to date on that throughout our journey here and on our social. So pay attention if I have a sneaking suspicion that we'll be doing a giving fund there for that. Now, moving on to some stories we talked about last week. Obviously, we saw the fallout of Dr. Fauci, the science, go before Senate committees and plead the fifth. Now, the question is what's the next step? Is there any way to hold him accountable for the decisions and efforts that he put forward and the things that he was saying, now having gathered information from his diary and the host of things that happened there? So what we do know is that that Congress and Senator Rand Paul have led a movement to have him be held in contempt of Congress. Does that really mean anything? Yet to be determined. But this is the step they're taking. And I'll just play this video and we can hear. So the decision that's been made there, this was last week, obviously. The decision is Rand Paul, from the committee hearing, took it over to the DOJ for them to take the next step. That they're still reading through everything, figuring out what they want to do. The max that they could do per precedence that has been played out with other contempt of Congress is a year in jail and a fine. That's the max. So there's limitations on there of what they can do. The real challenge and something interesting to look into is, and something we'll be following, is what do the states do? I think it was, if I remember correctly, Florida, Texas, and Louisiana. Maybe Texas may be wrong, but the Louisiana and Florida are ones, the AGs there, leading the charge on charging him because, it affected their states. And there's nothing that protects him from the report. Sorry, I think y'all didn't have sound on that. The report was that basically he's being held in contempt. It's going to go to the DOJ and prosecution. So that's playing out there. I'll try to get the sound fixed on the next one. And so now what's happening is that there's a major question from let me make sure I get this right, because this next one is vital. Because Senator Hawley comes out and says something on the Daily Wire with their Morning Wire last week about where they stand excuse me, for possibly being able to confiscate more records, but then also the issue of his immunity. And so hear what Hawley says here, because it's very interesting to see what he has to say. And it's something that I think we're going to have to pay attention to, because it could lead to something here.
How was that obtained, and how significant is that development?
Well, I think it could prove to be quite significant. It was obtained pursuant to a valid subpoena, as I understand it, from the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, which is just an investigatory arm of the Senate. And the truth is that, listen, this is all public information, and this is Dr. Fauci's phone as a government employee. This is the kind of thing that ought to be open and available for inspection when you have an investigation with potential criminal ramifications, as this one does. All of this could have been averted, I might add, if he would just have answered questions, which he still refuses to do.
Senator Hawley, has this been a bipartisan effort to get Fauci to speak, or are you seeing this divide between party lines?
I don't think the Democrats have any interest in this. They've had every opportunity for a solid.
So here we're seeing them talk about how he gets into the phone records and things there that become government record. And so then this breeds into is, okay, if we know this happened, and this is what the state AGs are looking into, is, okay, if we would have known the things that are in your diary now, we would have had a different course of action at the time when they were trying to deal with some things. But then when we go back to the beginning of this interview, they ask Hawley, where does this thing lay out? Where does this stand on the state of his immunity, being that he was given a blanket immunity at the beginning?
You vote to hold Dr. Fauci in contempt?
Well, because you can't have it both ways. You can't come to the committee and claim a full immunity of a pardon that Joe Biden gave him and then also say, but I'm not going to answer any questions. The law on this is very clear. If you've got immunity, you have to answer questions. Every prosecutor in America knows that. Fauci wanted to have it both ways because he didn't want to answer questions about why, for example, he got rich during COVID using taxpayer money. The guy needs to be held accountable for all of the terrible things he's done, and that list is long.
Now, Democrats like Senator Blumenthal made the argument that Fauci's lawyer should have been allowed to speak at the hearing last week.
So the question here is does his immunity stand, or does it not stand, and he has to be able to say things and be protected? And so what Josh Hawley's saying here is he's like, look, we have to abide by the law. The law says, okay, if you're given blanket immunity, which you already had from President Joe Biden, which he threw in the quip of it being an auto pin signature, which that really kind of goes nowhere because nobody's doing anything about that. So don't kind of get our hopes up into a wad. There's going to be no legwork there. Now, what Hawley's talking about is a challenge of his immunity versus his now taking the fifth. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to challenge it and say, because they're trying to break this, the idea of a blanket immunity that President Joe Biden at the time gave to Anthony Fauci. And so whether this goes forward or not is up in the air, something we'll pay attention to. But also at the same time is like, is it something, and this is why I bring this up, is this something to really put our efforts and our hopes into, of seeing the form of justice that maybe our flesh wants to come out, and in reality is like, I think this is one where we have to, one, seek the Lord, but then most importantly, understand that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, but in reality is we can't let our anger turn towards sin, so that if this stuff doesn't get taken care of in this lifetime, that ultimately the Lord knows what happened, and the Lord will be able to see through and bring about his justice on his timing as things continue to play out. Now, with that, there's a lot of things to stay focused on. I know a lot of people love to hammer down on this. Is it wrong, of what happened? Should he have taken the fifth 111 times, given that he had a blanket immunity? The challenge is there are lawsuits, there are other things out there. He didn't want to incriminate himself because not just the federal government is going after him. If he would have said something that may have protected him, and this is his side, if he's going to say something that might have protected him federally, but on the state level, he's not protected, that's why his lawyers were basically like, just say this. Because there is no leg room for him to be able to even do some of the things and say the things that the senators want him to say, where he is federally protected. So he obviously was going to say nothing. He'll probably never say anything. And I think ultimately his diary and the phone records are going to be the thing that speak for him at the time, because it tells him what he was really thinking and saying as this process plays out. And if justice were to play itself out, okay, let's have it be done properly. And so then we don't let ourselves get up into a work and get frustrated with what may or may not be happening the way and in the timing that we want it. Okay. Now with that, we get into President Trump. How does he fall and how does he move now that we see the Senate take a recess? Because before, this is last week, I want to play this clip from Senator Kennedy, because this is where he was at in this situation, where we see that they were trying to get some things done before they took a recess. And these are his thoughts on it. And I think most Americans would hold to where Senator Kennedy stood. And he says a lot of things. And I'm going to play this, and he's going to go through some details of what they were hoping to do last week, and more so, what they were hoping to do by at least staying this week, which they ended up choosing not to do. But this is what was laid out, and this is what they could have done, and they decided to take a recess.
From the state of Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy for more on all of this. Senator, good to have you with us today. So what's your prediction on the Blanche vote? Will he get confirmed or no?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of what we're going to be doing and when we're going to do it, John, you could probably give me 2 hours and some good scotch, and I still wouldn't be able to explain it to you because I'm just not sure. But here's what I think. We are going to vote on the Blanche nomination.
They did. That went
and as
through.
you know, the majority leader makes these determinations. We are going to vote on the continuing resolution to keep government open. We are going to vote on the budget resolution to provide money for the military and to pass the SAVE Act. We're not going to vote on the crypto bill, which I think is a big mistake. We're probably not going to vote, even though Jay Clayton has been confirmed, on the FISA bill. We may vote on the college sports bill because the NCAA, which lacks both testicles and a spine, can't do its work. So we've got to do the NCAA's work for them.
So these are the things that were on the table last week that were up for a decision, and they decided to punt the ball, proverbially, speaking of the NCAA, and not do their job. So now we sit here where there's things that could be done. And he later goes on to say, he's like, look, we should do these things. And he understands that some senators want to go back to campaign before the midterms, rightfully so, as things start to heat up in certain states, as we saw last week in Michigan. But the reality is look, there are things that need to be voted on, i.e. one of the biggest ones, the Save America Act. How is it that hard to press people and press Democrats and say, hey, they're not willing to vote? And hopefully on the campaign trail, those who are in these tight races can say, look, we have senators, Democrats, some Republicans who don't want to come to the floor and vote for this because why? They need to be able to answer that. So that's something to look forward to in the coming months as we heat up towards the midterms. But this leads into this. So now the Senate has taken a recess, and President Trump is at the point where he's come out today and said that he is semi-negotiating with Iran, coming off the heels of he's ready to go and escalate to the next level, coming on the heels of, at the same time, saying that leakage, if you want to call it that, to the New York Times, that the military has a munitions problem and a supply problem. And so he's trying to combat that. Is that really true? Is that not? Yet to be determined. But the reality is he says, I'm going to stop negotiating or semi-negotiating with them, which is a challenge. And this leading to the decision and more so the understanding of where does the United States stand? And some people say, this back and forth is harming the negotiations with Iran. There's some saying this is right where President Trump wants it. The reality is this is what's happening, and this is where he's at. And to gain an understanding, we'll watch.
Sure. To bend the regime his direction.
But Iran is now demanding major concessions from the United States to fully open the Strait of Hormuz.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst is live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. With diplomatic efforts ongoing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian officials are now making new demands. Iran's Supreme National Security Council issued a fresh statement this weekend calling on the United States to permanently end the war in the region, not just with Iran, but also with its proxies, and to compensate Iran for damages before the strait would reopen. Iran's foreign minister says even if a deal is reached, it doesn't necessarily mean the strait will stay open.
So they're telling you right here they're not being good faith actors. They're being bad faith actors. Hey, we're going to come to a deal, but that doesn't mean it'll actually stay open. And then the question this week and today is, okay, if this is how we're going to handle things, and you're involving, I think now they're involving Oman as a negotiating partner, does this actually play out? Because as you saw with Pakistan tried to lean things and have things go their way. So will Oman now try to persuade things and have things go their way? And the question is this, is who we've been saying this for quite a while, and more people are we're in agreement with, are saying the same thing of what narrative is true. Does Iran have the upper hand, or do the United States have the upper hand? Trump's coming out and saying, look, we're going to sit back and let these negotiations delay out as long as they need to, because the Iran dollar is crumbling. The inflation is crumbling its economy. And he's looking more long-term of what the effects are, because even the positions militarily that the United States is taking in Iran currently, and remind you, I'm having to be careful because I'm on YouTube here, censors, is they're knocking out major military sites, been confirmed both by Israel and by the United States, and even within Iran, that the attacks that are continuing to take place and have taken place over the last several months to the year have set them back a generation as far as in nuclear capabilities. And whether the question is of should we or shouldn't we, the reality is okay, even if the assessments were wrong, now we've set them back, a generation at least of being able to have that capability. And so now you're seeing things play out where China's backfilling them on a lot of things, protecting them, and it's exposing that relationship and to some degree strengthening it as well. But it's also showing the lack of capability that China is, and being the paper tiger that they are, and more exposure of that as we move forward. And President Trump now has a decision of how does he handle these things during this quote-unquote semi-negotiation. And the pressure, and I'm laying it out this way because pressure on President Trump is heating up. Say on the Iran issue, where they have who's actually in control, who's winning the debate, the narrative on that is changing. And now we saw over the weekend, which has been the stance all along, that Israel is not in agreement with President Trump's plan on Gaza. His 15-point plan that he came out with a couple weeks back, Netanyahu all along the way has said he doesn't agree with it, doesn't want to stand with it. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because you have those who are in obvious opposition of President Trump, highlighting the fact that, hey, Netanyahu doesn't agree with you. And here's CNN a little bit about that.
Hitting a snag, Israel.
Israel rejects the 15-point plan. I heard that there were those who said, you didn't say it, but we did say it. And here I am saying it again.
So Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu demanding the full disarmament of Hamas before his troops withdraw from the Strip. It's a risky move in an already fractured relationship, breaking with Trump in a time where support for Israel is already dwindling in the U.S. I want to bring in CNN's Jeremy Diamond in Jerusalem. And Jeremy, let's just...
So there is no doubt that there is a fracturing of thought amongst Americans on where to stand with Israel. The woke right, if you want to call them that, if you understand the horseshoe theory of politics, where they're causing this divide, and it's a divide in the church as well, that we're in the works of putting some things together to help navigate this and understand this, because the reality is okay, this has become a voting issue. This has become a dividing issue. You have Vice President Vance, who refuses to denounce things that his close friends, Tucker Carlson, who have been saying that there is an issue that he won't denounce, where certain people stand on this issue. And so it's becoming a challenge here on, obviously, in the Democratic Party, but then also in the Republican Party, where you have this rise of Democratic Socialists of America on the left, and then also even on the right as well. Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, all pushing this narrative here. And I want to play this from, and I'll close on this. I want to play this clip from former DNC chair Donna Brazile. And if you remember back to Rick Joyner, I can't remember exactly what it was. He wrote it in a book, but what he said with the prophecy is for America to soar and for America to do and walk in the design that the Lord would have called a nation in America to be, is it needs both the right wing and the left wing. And obviously there's this big swing now, but Rick said this. He said there would be a big swing to the left, but then there would be a hard swing back to the right. And you're seeing this. And he said we need both wings. And it's interesting because Donna Brazile says something that I think tries to, whether she realizes or not, I don't know if she ever heard that, but she says something very similar in specifications about the Democratic Party by itself that I think are equally important to understand and hear, because they understand to a degree the need for balance, and in her instance in the Democratic Party, but in reality is we need that balance on both sides.
I can tell you we're having the same kind of growing pains I saw on the Republican side, whether it was through the Tea Party in 2010, the activists who helped to bring about the MAGA movement. We've seen this tension both on the right, the populism that, created a wave election over the last several decades, and now on the left. Now, the left is insurgent in some cases. In most cases, you know what? The establishment, the moderates are still winning. But here's one thing. Reverend Jackson taught me a long time ago. A party needs two wings to fly. And unless we can have both wings, the progressive wing and the moderate wing, we won't be able to fly and win in November.
Congressman, what's your take?
So she said it. Need both a progressive and a moderate wing. The challenge is the progressive wing wants to destroy the moderate wing. And that goes for both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. And the reality is as I know people are talking about this, the Tim Sheets prayers and leaders and things that they're talking about, they're diving into this because they understand the reality that this is a problem coming in the days ahead. In specification, it has to do going back to Israel. Israel tends to be the focus on these types of issues. And if you see the Mandanis, now the El-Saids, Mohammed El-Said, and the senator in Michigan, or the senator-elect running for it, there's a problem. It tends to be this is the focus. And big hoopla about a lot of different things on the internet that we're going to continue to dive into. And so the reality is it can't be so singularly focused on just one party. We have to think about the nation as a whole. And the Democrats have a problem just as well as the Republicans have a problem where this radicalization that, people like Eric Metaxas have seen on Ivy League campuses, Charlie Kirk, the reason he was on campuses was to combat this. And so now we see where this is the fruits of that, and how are we going to combat this? How are we going to handle this and deal with this in the coming specifications, reality, in the midterms, but then into now the broader general election in 2028? Because this is really what this is leading up to. And the question is some believe that this El-Said getting the Democratic nomination in Michigan is a good thing. The challenge is now, is the momentum continuing to grow? Are people willing to give this stuff a chance and then have people suffer in the process, as you're already seeing happening in New York? So the challenge and the thing is right before our very eyes. And this brings pressure back on Trump because of his relationship with Israel, being that they are one of our only allies in the region. And you're now having Saudi, because an enemy of my enemy is my friend, is the stance that they're taking, where they're enemies of Iran. Well, now Israel and the United States are doing something about it, so they're leaning on the side of the United States and Israel. And there are other nations in there as well, where this pressure that is building, especially with Iran, to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which if you're Iran, you open it up, because what's happening is people are finding alternative routes of getting oil that would have gone to the Strait of Hormuz out through different regions. Saudi Arabia being one of the biggest ones of an advocate of say, hey, all right, we're going to go to different ports, so we're going to start shipping out of there. We can bypass the Strait of Hormuz altogether, which why weren't they doing that to begin with is a different story, but that's where things lie. That's where we're at now. And so we want to continue to, in agreement with those who are continuing to pray, we just want to add our voice and our portion and give updates on Colombia and the Fauci situation and not get so caught up in okay, how can we do this? It's okay, give your prayers, make your petitions made known before the Lord, and let it rest and let it be in his hands. And let his justice come forward and not the justice that we think that we have to internally create our own initiative and our own action to be done. Because in reality is whether spiritually or naturally, we lack that ability. But in spirit, we can surrender to the Lord and let the Lord walk us through that and let the Holy Spirit lead President Trump and his administration, because they're having to navigate all of these things, even shortly what Senator Kennedy brought up. And there are some good things that they're trying, and there's some things that, it needs a little tweaking. And being that we're human and President Trump and his administration is human, they need prayers as the pressure continues to put on. Because the reality is okay, while President Trump says the low munitions count is a leak and a false flag operation, the question is there any truth to that? And I think he's obviously trying to hold face, because if there is any truth to that and Iran finds out about it, they're going to call his bluff. And the reality is I understand why you wouldn't want that out. That's not something to have be put out. That is, matters of national security that limit the ability of the negotiations for President Trump and his administration. And so now things are altered because of that leak. And the reality is look, we want to continue to pray for President Trump in this situation as the wear and tear of trying to wear him down, wear his administration down to where they miss something. And in reality, that could cost people. I know the jobs report came out last week. Unemployment went down while jobs were lost, but that's because they're weeding out some of the fake numbers that were in there in the overall job market numbers for the Biden administration, and a positive. But the reality is it's going to have to continue to pick up before the midterms, because at the end of the day, it's people's pocketbooks. I think we learned that in the 2024 election. So blessings to each and every one of you for following along. We'll be back continuing to navigate this Senate recess that we're in, what can be done. Next week, we'll look at the midterms that are in contention as more and more polls come out, and there's news of possibly trying to push forward some of these new maps that are out there, especially in some battleground states. So we'll pay attention to that. We'll talk about that next week, along with a few other things. So continue to join in with us today. If you like, please share, like, subscribe. And then also, if you want to, you can give as well on our website, on our giving platform under Pipeline Report, to help support this ministry and help keep us going and fueling us as we lean into hearing the Holy Spirit for how to pray in accordance to heaven's will in these situations for our politicians and our leaders leading up to currently the midterms here in November. And blessings to each and every one of you. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.